wound up actually helping people with regard to their behaviors, helping leaders. I do a lot of conflict management right now within my company, helping executives understand how they behave with each other, how they behave with their employees, specifically in their natural ability and behavior, but also under stressful situations. So we mentioned the DISC. That's one of the tools that I use. One of the behavioral items that lists on the DISC is sort of a dominant behavior. So you can imagine if somebody's got an aggressive, dominant behavior under stress, they're probably 100 times more to be more aggressive. So I help people, what I say is become more aware of how they behave, and therefore can help them communicate more effectively with each other. So that's one of the things that I understand from some folks here. Anybody interested in opening their own business or starting their own business maybe? Okay, good. I'm sorry? I thought I hit something. So one of the things I would absolutely recommend is sort of have a passion for what you're doing. Clearly, you know, you probably heard that in school. You hear it all over the place, but it really is true. You know, you've got to love what you do. You've got to want to do it. Because there's going to be some ups and downs when you start your business with regard to, you know, how you're going to get the funding available. I would suggest certainly a strategy plan, a 5-year plan that is always a work in progress. Some of the things that's extremely important too is networking. I know Sierra, you probably all know that she worked for the Chamber, the Southern New Jersey Chamber. And I can't tell you enough about how effective networking can be. And you guys, obviously, you know, working together in the school environment, you network, you know, what you're doing right now is extremely important. But what I would say to you and suggest in the networking world is, don't network to get your business card out there. Don't necessarily network to say, here's what I do, hire me. Networking is really about building relationships. So while some people think that going to a networking meeting and handing out cards can get them business, oftentimes those are the people that don't get the business. And I would absolutely suggest that when you get out there, you know, talk about other people, ask how you can help them, because that'll come back to you in, you know, twofold. If you offer to help people, there's going to be a lot of volunteer time, I would suspect, as I've done starting up the business, to make sure that, you know, you get your name out there. Social media, I don't have to tell you guys, I mean, that's like second nature to you guys. To us folks who, you know, over the age of, I won't say it, but we have to have help, you know, in doing social media. But, you know your strengths, know where your strengths lie. A lot of people don't necessarily like to network. When you own your own company, you wear a bunch of different hats. So you've got to do a lot of different things all the time. And I would suggest that you know your strengths, you know when to ask for help. There's plenty of help out there for new businesses, people that want to get off the ground, people that are interested in starting their own business. But the most important thing too, I think, is knowing your strengths and being true to yourself as well, and be genuine. There's a lot of times when you're preparing for a speech, or if you've got to do something, you know, you're sort of put on this personality that you think you have to be one way in a group of people. But what I have found is when you go out and talk to people and truly interested in what they have to say, that's much more effective than sort of just getting out there and pushing your name out, because things will come. They will absolutely come to you. So just remember that from the networking. And I don't have to tell you guys from all of the logistical standpoints what's involved in owning a company, but it's when you own your own business, getting out at this late on a Friday is just unheard of. So be prepared for that, working a lot of hours if you start your own company. But again, if you're passionate about it, it's the greatest thing in the world, and you know, you can say you're your own boss, and you can make your own decisions, you know, and don't let people walk all over you, which I think is important as well. From a consultation perspective, I mentioned I was a consultant for many years as well. One of the things I liked about being a consultant was the fact that you went to different companies. You got to travel, meet new people, meet new companies. Consultants are viewed as experts in their field. So if you decide to be a consultant and not work for a company full-time, just remember that they're going to call on you for your knowledge and expertise. And so it's very important that what you put out there is really who you are. You know, your work is your word. And a lot of times when, you know, don't do anything halfway, you know, make sure that you dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure everything is in place. And again, I don't have to tell you guys from where you're at, especially in the MBA program, you're going through those exercises of being strong and making sure that all of that is done and crossing your T's and dotting your I's. So I welcome consulting. Some people like working full-time. I understand, though, from the research that I've done and the research that I've read, folks in your generation are fabulous at what you do. And what I try to do also is sort of bridge the gap between the people of your generation and the people of my generation in a company. A lot of companies out there are run and owned by people of the baby boomer age. Clearly, I'm sure this is not a surprise to you guys that there's definitely a communication gap between the two of you. Sometimes you guys have been referred to as lazy, which is not true at all. I firmly believe that you guys are a lot smarter than us and have the knowledge. You learn much quicker. You're very good at what you do. And so the idea is we have to figure out how to challenge you better, to get you more engaged. And that's a lot of the stuff that I do within companies as well. So being a consultant is great. If you'd rather be in one place, though, I don't recommend being a consultant because clearly the travel and going to different places is not for you, but it's a nice gig if you like it. Some of the useful tips that what I do for my companies, as I mentioned, I actually help them become more aware of their behaviors, specifically how they interact with others, especially at an executive level. A lot of times, the company that I worked for before I started my own business was a mortgage company. And during the beginning of the financial crisis, or I should say prior to, we had the owner who would actually go around and talk to people specifically and say all of the time that his door was open to come see him, to come if there's any issue. And the only person that had a physical door in the building was the president and CEO of the company. All of the senior executives on down were all in cubicles. And it was interesting to see over the next several years of the financial crisis, the 2008, how the executives that came in, because the other ones were gone or pushed out, how they came in and said to everyone, my door is always open, come in. However, they actually built physical walls and doors. So they couldn't understand why people were unhappy, and they couldn't understand why nobody was coming to them, and motivation was, down to the ground. And here they weren't, walking their walk and walking their talk. They were saying one thing and clearly doing something different. So that's an important thing with regard to what I tell companies that I go into, is make sure, your actions do speak louder than words. I can show you how you behave with people. I can show you how to communicate more effectively. But just as anything else, if you don't practice it, it's not like you're going to learn it one day and forget it. You guys all know this from school. You can't just study it for a test and then, expect that you're not going to have to know it later on. So what I stress for people is make sure you understand how you behave, but more importantly, when you're communicating to other people, understand how they receive information. And so what I try to do is help people understand how somebody else understands what they're trying to say, and get out of your comfort zone, and it may be easy for you to communicate one way, but someone else is not listening to you. So it's very important for you to understand how to communicate effectively with others and learn their behaviors as well. Again, you've got some natural behaviors, you've got stressful behaviors, you've also got, people perceive you differently as well. So there's various different types of behaviors that you undergo within even a course of a day. The other thing that I also recommend highly as well, and I tell my clients and I help them work on this as well, is culture. Culture is extremely important. There are many studies out there that have actually asked folks of your generation what they prefer in a company. And can anybody guess what 95% of the respondents said what they like in a company, what they go to a company for?
Culture.
Money.
What's that, sorry? Culture. Exactly. See? You guys know it. While money's important, obviously it's not the most important thing. And, some of the folks in my generation, and older have a hard time with that. They think it's just all about the money. And while that's important, having somewhere where they fit in, where people fit in and are welcome and the culture is wonderful, is extremely important, and it actually is much more productive on a daily basis than anything. So, and of course, teamwork is extremely important. Again, I'm reiterating what you guys already know. You guys work in teams, you work together, you live together, probably work together, go to school together. So it's extremely important to build that camaraderie with your teams and be out there and help each other. So that's kind of really what I had planned to say. Does anybody have any questions? For going out on your own business or doing some consulting, or where you think you want to go? Yes.
So now that you've had your own business for a little while, is there anything that you wish you had known before you had actually started the business?
Oh, how much time do you have? Yeah, there are quite a few things. One of the things that I was thinking about coming over here was I'm very controlling, and I recognize that. So I like to have control of everything. Having the undergraduate in computer science, although it was a long time ago, one of the things that I did was build my own website. And it lasted for a little while. It did what it was supposed to do, but I finally relinquished control and had to give that up. And so know your strengths, know what you do well, but recognize that you can't do everything. Again, otherwise I'd be home in bed, now sleeping, just because you work yourself to death, and that's not what you want to do. Enjoy it. One of the things I would have said, when you network with people, again, be genuine. That's probably the second biggest thing that I would suggest. Just be yourself. Be friendly. Don't go in and expect to hand your card, as I mentioned earlier, and expect people to give you business. Build those relationships. Because I'm running into people now that I've met 2 years ago that are calling me through word of mouth. They see me and they're calling up and saying, hey, I remember you and you did this for me. And even if you have to do volunteer work, it certainly helps in the long run. I absolutely recommend that as well. Thank you. Yes.
So, in terms of competition, how do you think running a small business is like when you have to compete against larger companies? Is there any specific strategy to take on larger companies, or do you have to stay away from their markets and kind of focus on the niche?
Well, again, it depends on what you're doing. So I would absolutely recommend looking at what field you're going into, looking at your competitor, find out what they excel in. If that's what you want to do, then you need to market yourself a little bit differently. I'm working with a marketing person now. You've got to find that sort of niche that people are looking for, find that pain point that you're trying to do. A lot of the stuff I'm doing now happened to be just by word of mouth, and that's executive conflict resolution. It just started from a behavioral thing that I was doing, and the subject just came up, and that was the pain point. If you can find that pain point, you're definitely on the road to being in the right direction. Anybody else? No, you guys want to start drinking? Is that why? I don't blame you. And by the